From Parliament, Natasha Piri. Natasha, a very good morning to you. A lot of excitement yesterday when there was news that former President Jacob Zuma might be attending. Of course, that has now been put aside. It's not really happening. What is the excitement about in terms of looking forward to the SONA?
Well, very good morning to you, Desiree, and of course to our SABC viewers. Indeed, lots of excitement around the event. Not only the event, but the number of activities actually leading up to the State of the Nation address. Of course, the President of the Nation, President Ramaphosa, will be delivering that speech at 7 p.m. But as I've said, Desiree, there are a number of activities before, like the procession of the bands, like a lot of things. And of course, I'll be joined by Kaso, who is the Secretary of the National Assembly, and he'll be taking us through the number of activities that will be happening. I know a lot of people are actually looking forward to the red carpet, but let's just speak to the man of the moment right now. Thank you so much for joining us on the SABC. Mr. Kaso, there's so many activities before the State of the Nation address, but media coverage has actually started right now. From now on till 7 o'clock, what will be happening?
Indeed, there's a lot that will be happening. I think it's important, firstly, to say that this is an activity that brings together the three arms of the state: the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. But also you have the diplomatic corps, you have dignitaries, people from the Pan-African Parliament and various other international organizations and local organizations, members of civil society, eminent people, former heads of state and others. So there's going to be a lot of activities. Some of the activities would be that you will have a military procession at a given point. The military band will be doing a procession up the Parliament Street.
And what time, in terms of time frames, what goes where?
Well, most of this will really happen in the afternoon. I may not have the specific times, but in the afternoon towards the event itself. So you'll have the military band, you have the parliamentary choir, which will also be entertaining guests, and at a given point, you then will start with the processions. Now, these processions would be the procession of the premiers, because you have all the provinces here, the 9 provinces. So you'll have a procession of the premiers coming up to the chamber, to the joint sitting, and then you will have a procession of the speakers of the legislatures, the provincial speakers. And you will then have a procession of the judiciary. A number of judges would be in attendance, and as is always the case when you have events of this kind. So those will be the processions, and those processions will, following those processions, you would then get to the procession of the deputy president, and ultimately the procession of the president.
Let's just talk to us more about the procession of the president. So his motorcade will stand here. He'll be then led up here to observe the 21-gun salute.
Yes, to observe the 21-gun salute, and you have the army band, and you have the salute being taken to the commander-in-chief, the president, and of course, following that, then they will proceed into the chamber.
So the national anthem, where is that?
That would be as part of the 21-gun salute process. So you would have the national anthem, 21-gun salute. That is all part of that military, the ceremonial that is led by the military. So they will then do that exercise.
Mr. Klasa, sorry to cut in. Before we go inside, you talk about various processions. You talk about the army, the bands that will be going throughout the streets of Cape Town. I know you don't want to touch on this, but could you just tell us about the road closures throughout the city of Cape Town? Do you know which roads will be closed? If traffic will be diverted?
I can't give you the specifics in terms of the roads, whether people would deal with that. But the whole idea is not to create deliberately create inconvenience. It was just to enable that everything happens orderly, that the processions happen orderly, and that everything else happens orderly. So there will be roads that are closed, obviously, around the city, and the city has issued communique in that regard. Even Parliament itself has issued some communication in that regard. But so there will be road closures, but it really is to enable this very important occasion. It's a very important program of the state, where the president would be talking about what has been achieved, talking about what is to be achieved, and interventions that the state is putting in place to ensure that the mandate of government, the mandate of the state, is accomplished. So it's a very important moment indeed.
You mentioned and you throw around words like order, and we've heard the EFF is actually planning to disrupt the State of the Nation address. In terms of readiness, how is Parliament equipped to actually deal with that type of situation?
Parliament is always equipped, and more so now after the rules were updated, because Parliament derives its mandate, its authority from the Constitution, which, among other things, empowers Parliament to formulate its own rules, to manage its internal arrangements, and to put its own procedures in place. So there are rules in place. This is another important matter to mention. This is not a sitting of the National Assembly. This is a joint sitting, which is a sitting of both houses of Parliament. Now, in the normal course of things, each house has got a set of rules. But in this instance, you have joint rules which regulate joint business. So those joint rules are applicable here. Now, you have joint rules that deal with how debate must be, that deal with, firstly, how this meeting must be convened. You have rules that deal with how debate must be conducted. But you also have rules that deal with order in public meetings, which is in a meeting of this kind. So Parliament is ready from that perspective, because there are rules in place to regulate its business. And remember, this is not the first State of the Nation address, and those rules have always been applied.
But are you not worried that, the State of the Nation address may actually be, prolonged by the expected disruptions, by the African Transformation Movement also saying that they might actually come up with a motion of no confidence against the president?
Maybe starting with a motion of no confidence. And I think the point that I've made is that this is not a sitting of the National Assembly. A motion of no confidence can only be done in the National Assembly. Why? Because the president is elected by the National Assembly and may be removed by the National Assembly. So there is a process being followed there, and the ATM is pretty much aware of that procedure. So we would not expect something of that kind to arise here. Worried, I'm more keen that the session proceeds. Look at all of this. This is in preparation for a very important session, and I think everyone should be keen that the nation hears what the president is going to say. Because remember, next week there is a debate on the same speech. So the issues that the president would have raised today will be interacted with by all political parties represented in Parliament. So it's not a question of saying people will not have an opportunity to engage on the issues raised by the president. There's a 2-day debate scheduled for next week, and which will be followed by a reply by the president. So to answer you, I am more keen on the session proceeding in terms of the rules, and I would imagine that all members of Parliament, the elected representatives, would be keen that that happens.
You say you'd be keen to see that everything actually goes along well, without any glitches. But in the eventuality of a glitch, what then?
In the eventuality of a glitch, the rules are there to be applied. And the rules accord presiding officers the powers to regulate business, to deal with points of order, to deal with most eventualities. I will not say any most eventualities that could arise. But remember, the rules are not used in isolation. You have the rules of the House, rules of Parliament. You also have the Powers and Privileges Act. you have the constitution, which is of course the supreme law of the land. So the rules are not used in isolation. Where the rules are not able to reach far enough, you would have also those instruments to invoke where necessary. But to answer you, it's all systems go as far as we're concerned, procedurally and otherwise.
So you're ready. Everything is okay. Everything is set.
No, we are ready. The institution is ready. The institution is ready, and to deal with, to ensure that the sitting happens.
And just last question. Before those formal proceedings start at 7 o'clock, what time can we expect people to actually start trickling in?
The bells will ring, I think, just before 6 o'clock, and by 6, all guests are meant to be seated in the chamber and members inside. Because remember, between that time, from 6 o'clock, you then start seeing the processions move into the chamber. So by 6 o'clock, everyone should be seated, ready for the sitting itself. Because whereas the president would start speaking at 7, a lot happens before that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Klaso. Of course, that was Mr. Klaso just taking us through, the number of activities that will be actually happening leading up to that State of the Nation address. And as he said, that it is all systems go. The bells will start ringing at 6 o'clock, and that indicates that every guest must be seated inside Parliament. And of course, the president will be then coming in and, of course, delivering the much anticipated State of the Nation address. Of course, yesterday we had a conversation with him where he was actually speaking to a grade 11 learner there from Lenasia South and Gauteng, and the president just basically saying that he would want to focus on economic growth in his speech, and of course dealing with the issues of the ailing state-owned enterprises in our country.